I'm Brad.
I'm Scott.
Steve.
This is Curiosity.
All right. We've got Steve here on the podcast today. I'm really excited. If I'm honest, in this moment, Steve's last name escapes me too. So I'm just meeting Steve for the first time. And so I love that about what we do here, Brad.
It is pretty amazing. I mean, I'm pretty jazzed. I have two of my favorite humans here with me today. So it couldn't be a better day.
It's going to be awesome. Steve, thanks for taking the time. You're in town from where?
Dallas, Texas.
All right. Welcome to Houston. I'm sure that you've been here lots of times. Steve, let's jump into it. Tell us a little bit about sort of what a day in the life of Steve is like.
Well, starting off, I guess, 900 pounds. We're an experience design agency, future focused. We utilize emerging technologies to create wow experiences and practical applications. That's my day job. And my wife, Rocio, is originally from Peru. She's been here since she was 16. And so that's a really interesting curiosity point, too, to think about today. But yeah, as far as my day to day, I mean, I'm focused on family and work and just living the best life I can.
Very cool. You've been in Dallas for long?
I have. I've been in Dallas since the year 2000. I was born in Germany, so across the pond, which is pretty exciting. My father was in the military and went to Texas Tech. And yeah, there's something great about Texas. And I think that it's the great people, too, that live here. So anyways, I've known Brad for a long time, so I'm excited to be here today.
We're very excited to have you on. It's pretty amazing.
So how did you guys meet initially?
What we were talking about this last night.
Yeah.
Initially was at a pool party. I had a friend named Kayla, and just a friend, and I lived in Dallas. And Kayla said, "Hey, I'm going to bring this guy, invite him to come to the pool party. Is that cool?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure. Please do." And so she brought a guy, and the guy brought Steve. And we don't actually know who the guy is, which makes the story even better.
Oh, no way. There's just sort of some
no idea
in-between person.
Yep. And Steve and I started talking, and we sat by the pool and talked about growing up in small towns, growing up with horses, and how much we love soccer. And it's kind of just love at first sight.
I love it. So poolside in Dallas 15 years ago.
Yeah. Pretty wild, too. Yeah.
That's quite the setting.
Wild.
No kidding.
It was pretty cool. And then just kind of kept staying in touch and kept running into each other and hanging out periodically. And then started hanging out really intentionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about that. I mean, so what were you up to at the time, Steve? And what did 900 pounds exist at that point? Or that was kind of a concept? What kind of led you into what you're working on today?
Yeah, we started the business about 11 years ago. And I think just when you're a creative person, you have that kind of just mindset and it's just who you are. You attract other creatives, right? And Brad being the innovator and creative that he is, I mean, you just build a tribe, and so, 900 pounds has been around about 11 years now. And before that, it was just creative contracting. It was a contractor for about 5 years, marketing, design, illustration, things like that. But yeah, it's just living in Dallas at that time. It was just this, you guys feel it here, that subculture of just creativity and entrepreneurship. And that's kind of how it happened. Starting out with the Mavericks and then went to Activision. And then, we worked with the Mavs for 7 or 8 years, and it's just one thing led to another. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What sort of, I'm always interested in the pursuit, kind of just the curiosity pursuit. There's sort of these moments really early in life where you kind of can, in retrospect, you kind of look back and you're like, man, that probably contributed to kind of my path or put me on a path. And so, at that point, we're kind of anchoring around kind of the meeting moment, but you were already kind of doing some contract creative work at the time. But what sort of got you down, broadly speaking, sort of the creative path? Was it something that you like to doodle in elementary school, or what was sort of that moment that you can kind of point back to say yeah, this is kind of how I identify?
The 5th grade, I think a catalyst moment was going home after soccer practice and drawing pictures with, markers on white paper, 8.5 by 11, and going to school the next day. It's 5th grade, going to school the next day, selling them for 50 cents a piece for kids' lunch money, and so I was an entrepreneur in 5th grade at 10 years old, And so that's the creative side. But I think being born in Germany, traveling a lot when I was young. And then, of course, I've been to 33 countries now, and just like you guys, I live an experience-driven life. And so I think that's where creative and experiential sort of marry. In my past growing up, I think there's that convergence,
Very cool. So you early on, you kind of had experience in taking a blank sheet of paper, literally, and creating something that was generating value. So you started to build that foundation and confidence set pretty early in life. How did you take that? What are some of kind of the milestones or steps along that path to get to the point where you're closing contracts with like the Dallas Mavericks, for example?
Oh, eighth grade was an interesting time period too, where, I guess the art teacher at that time knew that I had a little bit of a talent. I don't think it's much of an art talent. I think it was a drive, and I really enjoyed, art and drawing and creative as a child. So, my parents saw that attention and drive, and of course go to school and they notice it. And that eighth grade teacher basically gave me an opportunity to be a part of senior level art as an eighth grader. So I automatically got to be in art classes, advanced art classes in high school. And so when you have that confidence and that, determination to improve your skill set from an early age, it gives you confidence you carry forward, and just being an entrepreneur, it's kind of that path, right? A lot of us don't know what we're going to do in our 20s yet. We may go to college and shift courses. I always kind of knew it was going to be a creative business that I would have someday. And then making business cards in fifth grade, selling art, it's like it just kind of kept going that direction. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for that.
Huh. That's pretty wild. I mean, so what kind of, because Brad, you spent time around 900 pounds in your career. And so just be kind of interested now. I don't know if it's the setting of the room, but I feel like now I want to know kind of what ultimately kind of led to that combination of activities. I mean, I don't know how long you guys spent together under the 900 pounds umbrella, but it was a good chunk of time. And
it was
obviously you're still talking to each other today. So like it went well. And as Brad moved on to do other things, like that just be like, tell the audience about kind of what ultimately led to that point.
Yeah. Kick it off, dude.
Well, I mean, again, 900 pounds, just attracting good talent, right? People that are driven to create innovative things. And, that was a special time in 900 pounds. It's still a special time today. But looking back 4 or 5 years ago, we were in this small skunkworks studio in Bishop Arts in Dallas, right? It's a little pocket of a cool creative area of Dallas. And there was something special at that period of time because we're just on the cusp of growth. So people were just knocking on the doors to be like, hey, I want to get into VR. I want to get into AR. These things were just acronyms. No one really knew what was possible with these things yet, right? So being early adopters, people like Brad, I've known Brad for a long time. And there was a period of time he's like, I think I can really help, 900 pounds. Let me pitch something to you. And he pitched this concept of gamification. And we were leveraging that sort of game design, game science mindset of these projects and the work we were doing for these companies. And it was just synergy, right? Brad's a creative guy. And that went on for several years. Yeah. And we actually started a Houston satellite office at that moment in time. And, looking back, it was a blessing because I think it was just a timing thing, know?
I think so. I mean, we were actually talking about it a little bit last night when we were at dinner. And I mean, just thinking about the journey and like these like critical moments of impact and intersection that happened over the years. Like, I mean, Steve is one of the most influential people in my life. So having him on the podcast today was extremely exciting. But if you go back to 2009, like I was recalling a moment a few months after we met, like running into him at a coffee shop, and we got to just like chat a little bit, barely even knew each other. Like I invited him to one of my birthday parties. He came to the birthday party. And then eventually I left Dallas, but we kept in touch just periodically on the phone. And then when I was in education, we would talk about putting VR in the classroom and what would that look like? How would we create something like that? And it was just these like kind of cool pivotal moments over time. And then as I started researching more into neuroscience and design and how these systems could commingle and potentially be something that was magic, right? I mean, it was so ridiculous. I mean, we were talking about it last night. I put together like a PowerPoint deck and like designed these like 2D characters that were like super minimalistic. But I basically designed a game out of the pitch. I didn't even know what the word pitch was at the time. Okay. I just started putting like this idea on paper. And then I took Steve and one of the team members at the time, Michelle, through this like game. And so it was a game designed to communicate how game design could be integrated into these emerging technologies. And it was just fun. It was just ridiculous. Like it was so like unbridled creativity in every way. And I remember it being like, this is cool. I think this could be something. Like we should explore this together and see what this could become. And that was really what sparked the journey. And we used to jokingly say I was very driven because I would drive back and forth between Houston and Dallas every single week for years, for about 2.5 years. Did a lot of couch surfing, overstayed my welcome, I'm sure, of a number of places where I would crash over the years. We were at the time really just a small startup. In an old mechanics garage in Bishop Arts District in Dallas area, just like some creative kids with a lot of creative ideas and some really kind big brands that enjoyed and appreciated our ridiculousness more than anything.
So Steve, I guess I'm like, how did you know like what good looks like in that sense? Like in something that's sort of never been built before or seen before or experienced before, like you're kind of in the business of creating an experience for somebody that is it's a moment of awe, for sort of lack of a better kind of statement. It's something that you're sort of seeing and experiencing for the first time. Can you put into words some of the things that you're looking for, or like how do you characterize that in your own mind when something comes across the viewfinder and it's like, yeah, that's good versus no, that's got to be in the discard pile? Is it gut feel? Is it sort of like, what is it that you, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. We've cultivated a design process that that first phase is discovery. And we're really just brainstorming with the client, listening as best we can. But we've really come up with an art and a science and a formulaic approach of taking those business objectives and creating something really creative, really experiential for them. So it's really a phased approach. And it's something we've really gotten better at over the years. And clients are excited. I think we help them tell their story in a way that not only we can understand and create something powerful with, but their clients. Because a lot of times we're B2B. And so we've got to put our minds in their shoes, right? And try to build the best experience that we can. But from a curiosity standpoint, we're always thinking UX, right? That first moment, what does that feel like? It's not what you tell someone, it's how you make them feel, and you want those goosebumps. You want that moment of awe. And yeah, we've gotten a lot better at it over years.
So connecting in sort of a more visceral way, in understanding that a message is communicated, not just verbally, but through other kinds of means. And so just being better attuned to that is a component of it. But it sounds like one of the for sure pieces is really good listening skills to sort of inhale the customer sort of need. There's some kind of outcome that they come to the table with, and being able to kind of interpret that and shape that within. Can you talk a bit about maybe a specific example where customer comes in and says, hey, this is what I want, and you kind of deliver something and they're like, what in the world? But then they like eventually kind of come around. Is it like, there's a bunch of those kinds of things, or is it like, I'd just be interested to hear like an example of kind of how that unfolds and how you kind of steer clients kind of through that experience.
Sometimes they'll come to us with a blank white canvas, right? An area that's their wow experience area that they really want to focus on, right? And so, I'm trying to think of some examples, and we work with some of the biggest companies in the world, right? And we're working with their trailblazers, their disruptors there. Sometimes they're on the innovation team, on the marketing team, but some of them, they're the most creative on that marketing team. So, they've got an idea what they want to do, but a lot of times it's a dance, it's collaboration. And, an example would be AWS Healthcare Continuum. They have a big event called Life Itself. And some of the biggest players in healthcare in the world, from, Fauci to Sanjay Gupta, they're all going to be there. And so AWS is one of 7 or 8 big companies that's building this wow experience. Well, they've got 125 case studies that they need to figure out what's the hierarchical prioritization out of those. We're going to take that top chunk. We're going to visualize those. But right now, there are a bunch of words and a couple of statistics in a website, right? So all they've told us so far is we want a globe. We want it to be 3 foot wide in diameter. We want the user to come up and be able to rotate it. So, and we've got all these case studies. We want hotspots to engage. That's pretty much in the beginning, all the information we had. So during that discovery, we're building that, just plan of attack, right? What are the technical requirements? What does that roadmap look like moving forward? And so that would be an example that's been pretty interesting in that you get it, right? You have those key 3 or 4 areas of focus, but then how do you build all the in between? It's the space between the notes that make the music, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like that. In terms of, I just kind of want to double click in a little bit if we can, because obviously the podcast is around curiosity. And so I'm interested in just sort of like your own personal fulfillment in kind of working on these projects. You've been at it for a long time. You've got processes built and kind of ways to kind of put some framing around these things, but like kind of what's in it for you as you're kind of going through? Like, what are the things that kind of you get up out of bed in the morning? Like, why is it that you kind of go and tackle these kinds of projects?
Life is a journey, right? And I think similar with you guys, you get up in the morning and you're ready to rock, you're ready to problem solve and crush creative challenges. And when you're on a team and you're all going in that same direction, you enjoy that process, not only from a creative standpoint of the project, but just we've been doing this at 900 pounds for 11 years. And the time has never been better than now to build experiences. Like what used to be a nice to have is now a need to have for all these huge companies, right? So I think that the world kind of opened up, gave us an opportunity and relevance through COVID, through the pandemic. I mean, it just sort of got us on this rocket ship now, And so anything from innovation to interactive to immersive to the more super creative technical things, all these companies are prioritizing those. So we are stoked. I mean, you feel it in your organizations, right? There's this energy, that it seems like we're working through and living through the pandemic that we didn't know we could 2 years ago. So right now, getting out of bed, it's just an exciting time. Exciting time to be a nerd, It really is. What do y'all think about that?
That's a twist on the Drake line. What a time to be alive, but what a time to be a nerd. I may have to.
That's a t-shirt.
I may have to engage with that with you and make that a part of some of my moments of everything. That's so beautiful.
You guys can feel that energy, right? There just seems like there's this momentum that's been building, and
certainly a change in kind of I would say, my observation sort of broadly is that the pandemic in many ways just restacked priorities for people and forced people to think in ways that they never had to. And so that willingness to kind of be open-minded let a whole bunch of interesting new concepts, ideas kind of come crashing in. And I think in many ways that helped to accelerate change at some organizations. And I think that the dust is still yet to settle out from that in terms of who will benefit from that and who is maybe lagging now the curve where things are. But I think for sure that how organizations communicate with employees, how employees communicate with one another, how prospective employees communicate with organizations, all of these things are big challenges that really force people to rethink a message, how it's communicated and how it's received, which, like you're saying, I think plays in well for creating those kinds of experiences to deliver something that people haven't connected with before.
Yeah. I think the last time I felt this energy, I was actually, I was mentioning this to Steve last night. I was saying how it's the first time we've seen each other in 2.5 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's been a moment for sure. It's been a lot to catch up on. We should have done the podcast last night too. We should have done like a double episode. That would have been incredible. That would have been awesome because that conversation went on for about 7 hours, but people got real bored. So all jokes aside, when we were chatting last night, one of the things we were talking about is change in the air and those critical moments in life. And the last time I remember this kind of just energy in the universe was probably about 2016. And I remember we had this like chain link fence electric gate outside of the studio. And as the gate was closing, we were standing just inside of it. And I remember looking at Steve and just saying, dude, I just feel like an energy like in the air, in the universe that like I cannot explain, but it feels like things are about to like erupt. And so they did. And that was really when we hit probably our first big growth spurt. Started getting national, global attention for our work and what we were doing in innovation and design and creating these experiences and serious games, et cetera, et cetera. And team grew exponentially, about fivefold. It was just wild. And it happened over 18 months?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a freaking rocket ship moment for sure. And yeah, I would agree. I'm feeling that. I was telling someone recently, I was feeling a very similar energy and vibe in the universe. I mean, everywhere from what's happening in energy transition to initiatives around belonging and diversity, equity, and inclusion, things related to technology and how we're humanizing technology, but also being ethical and moral in the process of doing that. I mean, there's a lot of really beautiful things that are happening in society and in the universe. I mean, it's humanity's big, beautiful priorities that matter, right? Sometimes they're not beautiful in the moment, but there's a lot of beauty that can come from them, and that's pretty amazing. I can feel it right now. I can feel it again. It's cool. It's magical.
Well, you think about that quote too, the famous one, right? Steve Jobs' commencement speech. We've talked about that one over the years, but connecting the dots backwards. At that moment, it may not feel. You may not know the exact trajectory or the what's going on now, but it all connects moving forward.
Yeah.
What does next look like, I guess? Is it just kind of more of the same at bigger scale? Are there sort of things that are kind of either kind of back burner projects or things that you're kind of thinking about? Just kind of where is this going to take you over the next, pick a time frame, 2 years, 5 years, 10, whatever it may be, but kind of what does good look like for you, Steve, as kind of things continue to march forward?
Well, experience design is going to be a priority for every company. No question about it. For us at 900 Pounds is building a good infrastructure to not only scale those experiences, but also productize and programmatic, thought process when it comes to doing projects that are, 1 or 2 off. I mean, there's components or scalable parts of those projects that it could go so much bigger, so much further, impact other industries. So sometimes we're already thinking, scale when it comes to these projects, and so for now, looking ahead 2 to 3 years out, it's working backwards from there, future forward. What does 3 years look like, even from an org structure and a people perspective and a talent and skills perspective, and working backwards from there? It's exciting, man. That's what next looks like, because get ready. It's coming. Like we always talk about, technology is finally catching up with our imaginations. We're there.
How has, through the pandemic, how have you as a leader and as a human being, both from just an empathetic lens and a human lens, and also from an operational business lens, how have you applied curiosity to navigate through the complexities and the challenges? What was that journey like? And, what does it look like today in this moment?
Love it. Humans, right? I think we've all changed, have been impacted by the last couple of years going through this time warp. And it's like Ted Lasso. You guys seen Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
Being curious, not judgmental, right? Try to understand what people are going through from an empathy perspective with your team, for sure, but also with the clients, right? And then their clients. So I think being a leader at this time period has been one of the more challenging things for any organization, like learning how to communicate more effectively, because we're not in person anymore. We're having to work through Zoom. We're having to work all these different interfaces, and even dealing with conflict resolution, things like that, right? How do you build togetherness on a team when you can't see each other that often? So as a leader, it's like, wow, we had a moment where we've really had to assert ourselves, and it's exciting, but it's challenging as F, at times. Yeah. But what do you all think about that?
It's
a big, beautiful question.
There is no right answer.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it is a wider aperture in terms of just sort of how you see the world, and that you can't rely on sort of a narrow set of processes in the same way that you before. I think that the willingness to allow more ideas, more conversation, great quote that's out there that is on a mug that I really love is, if you're going to save the world, you first have to save the conversation. And
Awesome.
so much of that is, I think, rooted in the topic that we're discussing, is that you got to talk through it. There's no right answer. You've never seen it before. You never experienced it before. You're not, pulling into your back pocket, hey, here's my game plan. It's like, you gotta be able to have discussions with stakeholders, with those that are impacted, and figure it out. And that's not just at a business level. I think that's frankly for families, for couples and relationships, for parents and kids, teachers and kids, teachers and parents. I mean, it's just sort of across the entire sort of stakeholder map of your life. Like there's the way that you interact and how expectations are set and recalibrated and how we move forward better than where we were, I think all plays a role.
It's been fascinating, right? Probably on a global scale, one of the biggest experiments that we've ever undergone as a species is the pandemic. I mean, it is truly transformative. It's, miserably, horribly sad and depressing for all the lives and human beings' lives that were lost, for families that were impacted, for the challenges mentally, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally that humans went through with isolation. Now, there's a lot of things that were not so beautiful in that moment, right? I think, like any moment, though, there's also things that were really lovely and beautiful and magical that came from that as well. And where I think any one of us that are here in this moment in time are fortunate and lucky to be here, because we could have very easily been one of the ones who isn't anymore, right? And I think that one thing that the pandemic did is it was an experiment in orthodoxies. All these things that we believe to be true, that we had to have for life to exist, for economies to thrive, for governments to function, was totally just disproved in every scene, around every corner and every moment and every kind of just experience that we had. And it just happened time and time and time and time and time again. There was such a high level of frequency of just disproving a lot of myths that we thought were so true and so accurate. I must commute. Why? Right? Like, I must operate and live life this way. The Great Resignation is really the breath of fresh air, I think, from that. Maybe some misguided ambitions, but nonetheless, like, people kind of woke up for the first time and said, oh, wow, like, this is affecting me and my life, and like, who do I want to be and what do I want to be? Like, we got interpersonal and we got introspective. Like, that's beautiful. And it put us in such an uncomfortable place that it caused us to go to what is normally a really uncomfortable place, which is under the ice cap of our own humanity. But it was more comfortable at the time than the situation we were in, so we were okay doing it. And then there were, the horrific events like the death of George Floyd and others that led to hopefully what will be some positive movements in more racial and gender and generational equity, right? And when you kind of unpack all of that happening over a 2-year period, I think we disproved a lot of orthodoxies. I also think a lot of truths bubble up to the surface that we didn't necessarily realize and weren't paying attention to in so many different categories. And so, when we think about what does that mean in 2022, I hope the answer is it's a really uncharted territory, and it's an opportunity for humanity to kind of rewrite some of the things that we could do very differently and a lot better.
It reminds me of this book that you have to take on your next road trip. And of course, the last 2 years has been the years of road trips, right? Appreciating what's in your own backyard. There's a book called the Book of Questions. Have you all heard about this? So it asks you the most compelling questions that you can think on with your best friends, your wife, whatever it is, and it's these challenging questions that challenge your morals, your ethics, your integrity to think through big global questions. It's gut-wrenching to go through it, but it's really creative. And talk about curiosity. Check out the Book of Questions. So
cool. We'll add that one to the show notes. I think something that I'd like to add to the discussion, and I've mentioned it in previous forums before, but it's and I'm no expert, but in sort of generational research, there's a book whose name escapes me, and the author came and spoke at a thing that I was at, and I found it really enlightening when they sort of talk about there's these sort of defining events that happen, and so that sort of are these lines of demarcation for generations. So when you think of Gen X or Gen Z or whatever, like there's a line of demarcation that's associated with 9/11, for example, because you're old enough to feel fear, for example. And there are sort of, national, even kind of some global generational things like World War II or sort of, and what's interesting about the pandemic is because of the connectedness of the globe and because of how broad the impact was, there was no corner of the world that wasn't impacted in some form or fashion, that what has happened is now the clock is ticking on the most comprehensive generational line of demarcation that has ever happened on the planet. And the effects of that are going to take the next decade or so to unfold. But generally, you've got to be old enough so I think about my oldest daughter. She's 13 years old. She's very much in this bucket of individuals. And what's wild is she'll be in college, 8, 10 years from now, and have classmates from all over the world who have the exact same shared experience. 10 years from then, she's going to be working with people in maybe places around the world that had the exact experience and felt the same thing. And the optimist in me suggests that we're exiting an event related to the pandemic, because I'm sort of, hopefully there's not sort of like was it Deltacron that's kind of on the horizon or whatever. It sounds like a Transformers movie, but that sort of, if we're exiting sort of the pandemic, that we've sort of set into motion the single greatest generational line of demarcation that has the potential, in my view, as an optimist, to be one of the greatest unifying events that's ever happened. Because it doesn't matter if you're in India, South Africa, Brazil, Midwest, US, you felt the same fear. You felt you had the same experience. You had to hunker down. Somebody that passed away because of it. And who knows what that is going to unleash. I'm hopeful that it's a bunch of positivity. But obviously, as we're stumbling into sort of war footing and other things, there's some concerns around that. But I just want to add that I think from a generational standpoint, the pandemic, it'll take years and years to sort of settle out. But I really do think that it has the potential to be a unifier.
I think shared lived experiences do that so naturally.
Yep.
They just, and as you mentioned, it's at a global scale. I mean, just imagine having a shared experience with one person, with 5 people, with 10 people, with billions of other humans. That is very powerful. And yeah, I think it should make us all a lot more grateful and thankful. I think for sure. I think that needs to happen. And hopefully it has. And I think it should also give us a platform to build the life that we all love, whatever that means for every single person. And I really do believe that this is kind of a reset button. Call it the great reset, I guess, because everything now starts with the great insert word.
That's right. I think we can be hopeful about it. I mean, I do think that there are locations around the world and demographics that were disproportionately impacted. And we've talked a bit about this too, Brad, that, we've got the benefit of, working from home, that we can sort of Zoom call in and like nothing really sort of changes in many ways as it can accelerate kind of what it is that we're trying to do. And if you're a blue collar worker, or you've got to be in a warehouse or in a machine shop, or you've got to be in a chemistry lab or whatever it might be, that let alone medical professionals or others that are sort of on the front line, like you just came out of just an absolutely miserable experience. And so I do think that while the shared experience is there, there's also a component of it that has the potential to be really.
I also makes think about the ripple effect of that in the process of healing. Yeah. And like assuming that's just because the pandemic appears to be hopefully on the decline and slowly passing into the good night. There are very real ripple effects from that psychologically that may not fade quickly over time. And I think we have to be mindful of that, and even more just empathetic and just have more grace and patience with humanity.
It reminds me too of kind of like what you said about being constructive and optimistic about the future, is that we now, every organization, every human has understood that a couple years ago, it seemed like we had more rigidity, right? Now we have flexibility. We all have to be more agile, nimble, I'm curious what things look like 5 to 10 years from now, because we're armed with a different set of rules almost, right? The whole world is. It's a time of opportunity. It's an innovator's time. So yeah, it's exciting in a lot of ways too.
To me, it's going to spin off some new idea, new technology, new leaders, new something. Like there is a fuel and a motivator that has been sort of planted, a fuse lit somewhere on the planet. And I think all of us have felt it, and that's a bit of kind of what we're talking about. But I really do think that there's some, again, 13-year-old somewhere that 10 years from now is going to rethink and recast and kind of reestablish. It's going to be kind of exciting to see. I wanted to ask Steve, maybe just kind of pivoting a little bit, if we can, is you've got your finger on the pulse of kind of bleeding edge technology. Like, what is sort of, is it the metaverse? Is it like, what is sort of the next like platform tech that, is it the kind of thing that Elon is advocating for, that's like direct connection to the brain? I've done with that, that's like, what is like the next, like speculate a little bit, like what's kind of the next big disruptor that you've got your eyes on?
I think holograms are something big a lot of people are excited about, right? And there's going to be some kind of integration probably with your phone. There's going to be some integration with your tabletop. And again, you think about Star Wars, it's not far away. When it comes to sensors, I think you think about your car, 10 years ago, it had 100 sensors on it. Now it has thousands. Like, how exciting is that as far as connectivity and communication and whatnot? But from an experience standpoint, things like haptics are going to be really cool. New interfaces coming out. What's next after 8K, right? How many more Ks can we get on your TV, right? Like, what? So I think
probably holograms.
Seriously, augmented reality is really exciting. I mean, wearables, but when it comes to just even how you use your phone, I mean, this thing is the ultimate tool. How are we going to leverage it moving forward? It's exciting.
That's cool. That is a lot of fun. Are there any, I guess outside of kind of building experiences for clients, like, what do you spend your time doing? You mentioned, I don't know if you have a wife and kids, and like, what are some of the other kind of projects that you're working on or spending your time thinking about?
Brad and I were talking about this yesterday, is like, you miss the tactile feel of actually creating, right? When you live in this digital space, whether you're digital, physical, phygital, metaverse, whatever it is you're working in to create 3D, sometimes just going back to the very beginning, pencil and paper. Like, how cool does it feel to actually write again, or draw again, or diagram out something, or build a formula? So a lot of times, like, my wife and I we went out to Broken Bow a couple weeks ago, right? We stayed in the cabin, and I mean, that every 4 or 5 months, just disconnecting is fantastic. And yeah, we try our best not to watch any TV. We try to disconnect from our phone. We talk, we read, we write. It's like going back 200 years, right?
Nice.
Like, that is so
Love
fantastic for creativity, curiosity, and just digitally disconnecting. And so that's something I've been into lately, is trying to get away from technology as much as I can, because we're all, it's an Achilles heel. It's a crutch. It's a part of so much that we do.
Yeah. I mean, that out of context time is so incredibly important to creativity, curiosity, just the entire, I think, nature of our daily lives, especially in very urban environments, right? Like, it's natural that you want to step away, and you hope that you want to step away, especially when you can get in nature. Man, I think that's the greatest inspiration anyone can ever have, is just to go immerse yourself in nature for a period of time. You said, just step away from all the technology and write a letter, journal, draw something cool, like, have a conversation, read a book. Oh, it's beautiful. Love those moments. Cherish those moments.
Take advantage of them. You never know, sort of like when travel shift again, and just kind of how I feel like spontaneity is sort of an ingredient that has found its way into a lot of households as well. Cause it's just sort of like, hey, we don't have as much sort of like forward planning on stuff, because you just don't ever really know. So like, kind of the risk profile of securing experiences starts to look different as well.
So true.
Absolutely. Well, you have children, right? I mean, like the creativity that just ooze from children, right? Like you're spending more time at home probably the last couple of years than you have in the past. And, you know, when you have a 13-year-old, I mean, I can't even imagine. For us, we think about, you know, could that 13-year-old be a QA tester for us, right? Could they, you know, quality assurance or testing when it comes to experiential?
Man, I just remember years ago when we talked about let's get a bunch of 5-year-olds and throw them in a room and just let them brainstorm on some challenge. We didn't ever do it, but I wish we would have, because they would have come up with way better ideas than we could.
There's actually a new show that just came out. Okay. Right. There's these builders and carpenters and makers, and they basically get children to come in and pitch them on big ideas. And they sit there like Shark Tank pitching their idea. And, you know, they'll take one out of so many and they'll pass, or they'll be like, boom, that's it. We're going to make that. So they make these wild, crazy, like, you know, and it just came out. So I don't even, I think it's on Netflix.
Okay.
So check it out. I can't remember what it's called, but stay tuned.
Track it down and get it in the show notes. That sounds awesome.
What's cool about it is because it's cool and entertaining for children, but it's also cool and entertaining for us. So I think it's a game changer as far as television goes.
Oh man.
Well, I love the giving so much of, I think, elementary or kind of adolescent or children kind of creativity is like it has such a short half-life. You know, it's just kind of like Play-Doh thrown together and then it's just kind of balled up and put away, sort of all in an effort of like maintaining tidiness and sanity around the house. And so to like create an off-ramp for a young child's creativity to sort of see it come to life, I think is not only inspirational for the person that created it, but I think helps to sort of draw a line between kind of those points for any kid that's sort of watching that or kind of connecting with that. I think that's super cool. My kids are into baking a lot of the time, and so, you know, we watch these, you know, baking shows, and these Nailed It is one that comes to mind, where, you know, it's they're deliberately like terrible cooks, and so it's a little easier to kind of connect with as a 9 or an 11-year-old cooking in your kitchen. But I do think that helping and inspiring young kids to be able to see sort of where the actual kind of matured product or final output could be. And so would argue that in the kind of work that you're talking about, that allowing sort of younger and younger individuals to sort of see and experience and kind of contribute to could help to ensure as well that as those products are built out, that I don't know if these are the right terms for it, but just sort of the ethics of, or, you know, the impact on the brain or whatever kind of thing that, you know, might be an important consideration in those experiences as they're built out, is to consider that stakeholder group, because no doubt that kind of technology will push kind of earlier and earlier as it finds its way into classrooms or into other areas. You know, we have a PlayStation 4 VR set. You know, we've got like Iron Man virtual reality, and you kind of put the set on, and you can see the difference in impact. Like, it's like the got to be careful about like the 6-year-old being in that VR helmet for very long versus, you know, the 13-year-old versus dad, but like just other kinds of considerations. But I think I think for sure the more we incorporate youth into some of those things, the better they got to be considered.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's super important. One thing that came to mind, I was spending some time over at a really cool space here in Houston called Clarity Institute recently. And it's a very funky, very cool, super well-designed space. And in the back corner by the graffiti wall, there's an old punching bag. And on the old punching bag, it's all like messed up. It's got like graffiti on it and just like paint kind of thrown all over it. Like, it's just a hot ass mess. It's amazing. And the punching bag specifically, not the institute. The institute's phenomenal. The punching bag. And so I asked the guy, his name's Brad, by the way. I said, hey, Brad. I was like, what is the punching bag? And he was like, the punching bag. Because this dude is like he's probably one of the most creative humans I've ever met. But what's so beautiful about his creative process is everything is rooted in intentionality, every detail. There's not a single thing that exists in the space that does not have a purpose associated with it. So I naturally assumed this had a purpose. He said, well, when it comes to innovation and creativity, punching bags are really important. You need a sparring partner, and you need some tension and friction. You don't always need to get along and have everything be, super synergistic. There's power in the moments of tension and friction. And so in an agency of the size that you get to run every day, founded, run all the things, what is that like when it comes to that aspect of tension, and how do y'all work to resolve conflict as a team?
Great question. I mean, we're just intentional about it, right? We get in front of it. We do our best to have team building, and just focus on things that get us thinking together. And we have epic all team Monday morning meetings. We've gotten so much better over the years. The pandemic forced us to just talk about more inspirational, motivational stuff. I go sometimes into the weekend and I'm reading specifically for something to jam about, right? And to just conjure up thoughts. So tension is going to happen. And, I think it's just appreciating that, again, not being judgmental. That other person's a human being. They come from a different path. They've got a different past. They're in different now. They're dealing with things just like you are, just like we all are. And you're intentional about trying to get ahead together, right? You're on a team. So tension's going to happen. I don't think there's any real recipe to get through it except for really good communication and effort.
Yeah. Do you have a sparring partner?
Brad Versace.
That's such an awesome today, right? Yeah. That's such an awesome perspective. I just thought it was so cool. I was like, you need to have a sparring partner. I was like, that's cool.
Like a weeble wobble.
Yeah.
It's like boom, boom. Not just to punch it back. That's funny.
What's cool about it, I guess, if you've been at it long enough and you appreciate that, is when tension arrives on the scene, something cool is going to happen. And sort of embrace that and understand in terms of connecting those dots that, like, hey, if there's really tension around something, that like there's probably something that's going to come out of this that's exciting. So if everybody's motivated to sort of see the output, then hey, let's get in here, gloves off, and let's work through it and see what kind of serendipity or magic is created.
And maybe some gloves on time is what Brad was saying.
Right.
Cool.
But one of my colleagues also says too, like, get angry as F for 5 minutes, get it out, and then move on. Go grab a beer together or go hang out. Just get it out. Yeah. Talk about it. Get it on the table.
Unload.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good advice.
I think you have to create the right culture, though, that is a feedback-rich culture and a strong, transparent communication culture. Because if you don't do that, if it's not common, I don't think it's always received super well, and that can definitely create challenges. Sounds like y'all have done a good job of creating that culture.
Well, it's always a work in progress, but just trying your best to be, a psychologically safe place, right? Not fear of failure, but fear of don't be afraid to fail. No one's gotten fired for failing. It's the efforts that get you in trouble. So get through the failure with efforts.
900 pounds is one of those, special magical unicorn places for sure. But one of the coolest things about it is it's one of those types of environments where I think the only time anyone could probably ever even remotely get close to being in trouble is for not pushing the boundaries far enough. That's about it. Other than that, you're good. You just stay stoic and keep rocking.
Isn't that cool that we all have different boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And asking questions and being curious about what is someone's boundaries. What does comfortable look like? What does uncomfortable look like? Right? It's fun. We're humans. Ask questions.
On a path to discover that kind of every day, where is that? And every individual is different. And so you're on that journey with your employee base to sort of challenge them. And in some ways, do you have to sort of be the most chaotic and and unpredictable and boundary pusher? Is that sort of how you motivate? Is hey, it's psychologically safe to be way out over here? Or how do you sort of manage that? Do you guys get to sort of rotate who has the baton on who's the total whacked out far extreme? How do you manage that?
Well, I think to your point, being a leader is difficult, right? You've got blind spots. You're not going to see everything. You see things from a different lens. You're never going to have all the information, and you learn trust, right? You learn to not only confide in and build trust with your leadership team, but they're the ones sometimes in the trenches more than you are, trying to understand, I wish I knew more. You all wish you knew more, but how can we without asking questions? So I just ask a lot of questions. I try my best to listen. Yeah.
What's your favorite question to ask, Steve?
Ooh.
Good question. That's my answer. No. What can I be doing better? And typically I have to ask that several times because sometimes if I ask that, somebody's not going to shoot me straight the first time.
Right.
Like I want crystal clear, candid feedback. What can I do better?
Yeah, that's a hard thing to get as a leader, to sort of a real, honest, authentic answer consistently across a broad organization, no doubt. Everyone's going to be measured in kind of their response in some form, but
I think it goes back to the culture, though, in a sense, though, right?
No doubt.
I mean, you having built a very, very shoulders of giants culture in every detail of the fabric of the entirety of the organization, I think that plays such a critical factor. Because honestly, that was one of my favorite exercises back in the day. We would do that. Every meeting was a walking meeting, just about. It was a really good way to have conversation and work through opportunities, challenges, certain moments, friction, whatever it might be. But just sitting down together and just like asking each other, like, what can you do better? That's a cool moment to share with another human being, because you really do. You get to like be really honest with each other and learn how to just continue to elevate. But it's not like an I gotcha kind of mindset. It's a truly like you believe in each other and you want to be better. And so you're willing to be that vulnerable with another human being and with other human beings on your team to be that honest. And I think that kind of honesty is so powerful. Goes a long way.
I love it. Well, we got all the way through this episode, Steve, and I still don't know your last name.
I don't have one.
Yes. Even better. Well, Steve, it's really cool to have you on the show. It's been a privilege. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. It's great to be here and continue being undercover.
Onward